Yo, what's going on, guys? This is BunnyMuffins. We have the meta snapshot for patch 12.5b. There was like the biggest B patch of our life. A lot of things switched up because they changed and nerfed a lot of things. It's mainly like 70% of the stuff was nerfed, 10% buffed, 20% unchanged. So what that essentially means is that everything that didn't get touched, a little bit stronger, everything got nerfed. They're mainly just slight nerfs, so nothing too crazy changed there. So starting at the top, we have the Strikers. And Strikers right now, they are my comp of the week. I feel like they just rose up unexpectedly, and you should be playing it now before it kind of catches on. I expect this comp to drop maybe to lower S tier as the patch progresses. After that, we have Renata, Bruisers back up in S tier, and then Innovators and Socialite Irelia still at the top. One thing to note about this week is that pretty much everything's viable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, guys, it really depends on your augments. I've been saying this since the start of set 6. If you get a good augment for something, it doesn't matter if your comp is in the F tier. If you get the right augments, it will work, and if you also hit the right units. So moving on, we are going to go to the A tier. We have Twitch Reroll, Arcanists, and Snipers all there. They are going to be like pretty solid. Twitch Reroll is very similar to the Innovator build, so it's still pretty strong. More so at lower elo than higher elo, so like the lower you are, the better this is. The higher you are, it gets a little worse. Arcanists, pretty solid. I've been seeing Ahri actually being quite successful despite the perception of Ahri. Yeah, she's just been favored a lot by some of the higher elo players, not so much from the lower elo. So it's the opposite of the Twitch reroll. The higher you are, Arcanists are going to be better. The lower you are, Arcanists are going to be worse. Inverse for a Twitch reroll. Next up, we have Snipers. I finally have Jhin in like at a real tier, so I'm definitely excited about that. Onto the B tier, we have Chemtech Challengers. They recovered from the C tier. Debonair Draven, Mutant Malzahar, Talon Assassins got nerfed a bunch. That's why they fell back down here. Ashe reroll, nerfed a bit too. Ashe is borderline like B- C+ right now. Syndicate Ahri, same story. Twinshot, same story. And then Reroll Corki and Hextech. Like pretty much everything over here. They could be in the C tier. They could be in the B tier. They're kind of the in-betweeners right now. I'm leaving them in the B tier though, because if you get the right augments for them, they are still going to work out fine. Whereas even with the right augments for Reroll Brand, you still need to get a little lucky. So now let's get into how to play every single comp. I'll also be going over my strategy for the patch right now. And at the very top, for Strikers, we have two different builds. I have the Sivir main carry build here, where you go more like for 4 Hextech, 4 Striker. And then I also have the Irelia main carry, where you go for Assassin Spatula and you put her on the Socialite Hex. Very similar to the other Irelia build. I think Irelia is just probably the best 4-cost carry right now. Both builds are pretty solid. Again, it depends which unit you 2-star first, so you itemize whoever you get on that, and it also depends on what type of augments you have. If you get the Assassin Spatula, of course that means you generally want to go for the Assassin Irelia version as well. But yeah. Also, like Socialite Square, it doesn't really matter where it is because she will jump to the back. You could also play it without the Assassin Spat. I've seen it work too. You would replace the Assassin Spat with Last Whisper. And for this build, you just do standard leveling. Onto the next build, we have Renata Bruiser. Nothing really much has changed here, just pretty solid comp overall. You use this comp to kind of transition into a super duper late game. You could play almost any legendary unit. You could play Renata in almost any comp, just splash her in and then fill your ranks with whatever you are hitting that day. Onto the next build, we have Innovators. So Innovators, they are a little strange, just again, because you could do all sorts of different carries. I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now. My favorite version is the one with Senna or Jhin carry right now, just because they fit so well into the comp. Jhin, when he's in, he gives you Clockwork. Senna, when she's in with Orianna, it gives you a bunch of enchanters, and you have Socialite from the Seraphine as well, so you get 2 Socialite buff. So it really depends. If you get a lot of copies of Senna, go for Senna 3. If you want to do Irelia carry with the Socialite Hex from Seraphine, you could play her as well. Kha'Zix works, Jhin works, pretty much any random legendary works. Jace 2 is obviously really good because he's an Innovator as well. Dragon is also good. The 7 Dragon 5 is also fine. They both are definitely viable options. Now onto the next build. Socialite Irelia or Irelia with Scrap both work fine. We have the Scrap build down here and the regular Socialite build up there. You also don't have to play Irelia in this build. For example, I see if it's in the back row, a lot of Socialite Sivers, some Socialite Jhins. Really, your carry can be anyone you want. It just depends where the square is. I even see people do like the old Socialite Tahm Kench to try to farm items in some of these games if they get an early Tahm Kench. Now onto the A tier, we have Twitch Innovator Reroll. So pretty similar to the Innovator build we saw before. This one's just a little different in that you reroll for level Twitch. I'm going to be coming out with a reroll only video, I think tomorrow, so definitely look out for that if you want to learn more about what rerolling is and how to do it, because I have a ton of examples of this comp and other comps similar to this. Onto the next build, we have the Arcanist build. So the one we have here is a reroll Malzahar build. That build's still pretty good. The other version is going for Ahri. It's pretty much the same comp you see here, except you put all the items you have on Malzahar on Ahri. Maybe you want a blue buff, Jeweled Gauntlet, and a Hextech Gunblade or Infinity Edge instead of what you see here, instead of the Morellonomicon. But the crux of the build is the same. You go for Arcanist, you go a bunch of enchanters, you add in some late game units, and you are going to be good to go with Vex or Morgana as your main tanks. Onto the next build, we have Sniper Jhin. Jhin is a little bit of a weird case. So there are like 50 different Jhin builds. So I do not recommend playing the Jhin comp unless you know what you're doing. If you are the type of person who can only play a comp if you look at a guide, don't play Jhin, because while this is a working build, you're really not taking advantage of the potential of Jhin if you are just going for this specific set of 8 units. He works with so many different combinations, so you just need to flex your way in while using him as a main carry if you happen to get him 2-star. Onto the next build, we have the B tier. So Chemtech Tryndamere, he actually made a bit of a splash up. This is like the Chemtech Challenger build. I also see some builds going for like 6 Challenger. Both of them work pretty well. I haven't really found that much of a difference between the two, but if you have in your games, let me know which version you think is better in the comments below. You want generally sword items for Tryndamere and attack speed items for Warwick, and there are a lot of different itemizations you can try. So Tryndamere, he definitely likes a Bloodthirster. I feel like that's the only mandatory item on him, and then a QSS is nice, and then Last Whisper, i.e. it really depends on who he's attacking for how he's going to use that. Warwick QSS I think is mandatory, and then after that like Titan's Resolve, Rage Blade, Static Shiv are all pretty good options. After that, of course, you could throw in a random Renata with a blue buff Morello if you happen to get a bunch of AP items, because those items can't really be built on Tryndamere or Warwick. Next build up we have is the Debonair Draven. He got a slight nerf. I feel like it wasn't that deserved, but since they're nerfing everything else, I think they just gave him a very slight touch to kind of keep him in line. But I think he's in the B tier. I don't really think he's going to be destroying that many people on this patch. Maybe there is a different build though, because the question is he better in Debonairs or is he better in Challengers? What is the best build for Draven? Maybe it has not been discovered yet because the patch just came out, but we'll definitely keep an eye on this in the future. And for this one, you do standard leveling. Next up, we have Malzahar. This is like, you could do a reroll build. You could also go for a Kha'Zix build. It depends what the mutant trait is that game. And also, like, you really want to take advantage of Mutant Spatula. That's the main strength of the mutant buff, because you could give ridiculous stats to various different champions in combinations that they would not have had without getting the mutant buff. So I actually think this is one of the cooler traits right now in the game, because there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do with the spatulas. But there are 2 ways to do it. You could do standard leveling, you could do reroll for Malz and Cho'Gath. I personally love the reroll Malz build, but both ways have their merits. It just depends on what type of game you are having. Now onto the next build, we have Talon Reroll. This comp got hit a ton, so that's why it dropped down a lot. I had it like in the high A tier last week, but yeah, like it just got nerfed a bunch. Talon items, he could actually build a lot of stuff. I've seen like even Hextech Gunblade do well on him. Tons of different items work. I think you just need the IE. That's the only mandatory item I have for Talon. Rest of your team, Morello, Frozen Heart on Echo is nice if you get those support items, and then like find one main tank. I like having it be Leona, so I give her the Gargoyle Stoneplate, but you could also go for 5 Debonair, you could go for 2 Assassin, lots of things you can mix up here. Next build we have is the Syndicate Ashe reroll build. Again, this one got nerfed a ton. I feel like Ahri did not deserve all the Syndicate nerfs when they were nerfing the Syndicate Ashe build. It's still playable, don't get me wrong. You just need a lot of copies of Ashe in order to do so. So you do have to be careful about going for this comp, because last week you could go for this a lot more often than you can now. So in some situations where you were borderline before, whether you're like, should I commit to this comp or should I pivot into something else? I would recommend pivoting to something else if that was what you were thinking last week in that same exact situation. On to the next build, we have Syndicate Ahri. So yeah, again, Syndicate's got a lot of nerfs. I feel like Ahri didn't deserve them. It was more for the Ashe build. But that's why she's down here in the B tier, like the lowish B tier. Yeah, like it just isn't the same. I'd rather play her in the Arcanist build if you are an Ahri fan. Next up, we have Twinshot. This comp like fell to the basement, I feel. It was like a pretty solid comp last patch, I think because it got popularized because they buffed it a little bit. But then they just immediately nerfed a bunch of stuff about this comp, and it is just not at the same power level as it was before. So I really only recommend playing this build if you get the Triforce augment. If you do not get that, it's not really that worth it. Double Trouble also works really well for this comp. Next up, we have the Corki reroll build. If you get a lot of the Yordle augments, and even if you don't, I see people do this in High Challenger even without the Yordle augments. It still is pretty powerful. It's kind of like one of those comps where you go it if you get like an amazing start for it early, as is with most of the other B comps. The general idea of the build is just to stack up a damage Corki and then stack up a damage Vex and then reroll your Yordles until you get people to 3-star. Drop in a Twinshot unit, Jinx is the best one, but if you don't get her, just use a Lucian. And then hopefully your Corki can be doing some carrying until you get to Veigar. Veigar 2 is actually pretty strong. Veigar 1, I don't really like playing him, but I have seen other people use him. I normally just wait till Veigar 2 though before I level up and put him in. Onto the next build, we have Hextech. This build has seen a small buff. It's not enough yet. If you want to play Sivir, the Striker build is better. But if you like the on-hit build of Hextech, it's still playable, but it's just not as good as it was in the first week of the set. So general idea, main tank items on Alistar, attack speed on Sivir with a static shiv being mandatory, and then you kind of just go from there. But that is going to be it for the A, B, and C tiers. I don't recommend playing Brand Reroll right now. Normally in the C tier, I just don't like kind of playing that type of style. But as for how to play this patch, I feel like you want to start off with some sort of sword items in mind, because if you look at the top comps, Striker, Innovator, Socialite, Irelia, Twitch Reroll, and Snipers, all these comps like the attack damage items. So I like going for either sword or bow or glove on the first carousel. It doesn't mean that the other ones are bad, it's just what I prefer right now. And then I sort of just take some early game tanks. If I have some of the Bruisers, I like to go into either Renata Bruisers or the Strikers because there are a lot of overlap between their tanks here. If you get the Innovator start, obviously you can definitely explore Innovators. And then if you do get like a Bodyguard start, going for Arcanist isn't a bad idea because you could kind of transition from Poppy. Snipers are pretty viable there. Lots of different options. You aren't really locked into anything in the early game, I feel like, but just make sure that you follow your game plan with your augments. That is the theme of the entirety of set 6 and set 6.5. So whoever's going to do that the best is going to climb the fastest. So that is just something to keep in mind for this week. But I'm going to keep this video short because a lot of the comps are kind of similar to what they were from last week. So if you guys enjoyed this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. I update this every single week. So next week, next Friday, we'll be doing a new update on this. But do check out some of my other videos, which are going to be coming in the next couple days because they are a little different than what I normally do. So with that in mind, I will see you all later.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.